let's talk about improving your fantasy team through the waiver wire heading into week number 13. I'm going to go position by position. You can check out the time codes below. Do me a favor, hit that like button to show some love. Let's start off with the position everybody's really looking for, if we're honest. That is the running back position. All right, I am mainly speaking to like 10, 12 team leagues when I say these guys are available. So you are now looking at my top 6 running back pickups on the week. Speaking about Amir Abdullah, we had Alexander Madison out, Zamir White out with injuries, and Amir Abdullah came in and really was a serviceable name. He had 8 carries for 28 yards. He also had 6 targets, 5 catches for 37 yards, and got into the end zone. That is back-to-back weeks with a receiving touchdown. Also back-to-back weeks with over 10 PPR fantasy points. He's been serviceable for them. He's been pretty decent. If Madison and Zamir White continue to miss time, then he'll be a playable name. And we know that if it's only him out there, he's their number 1 option. Guys, out of 77 snaps, he played 69 of those snaps. Okay? So he's clearly their number 1 option. At number 2, if you need a running back this week, you're in a desperate situation, well, you should definitely look at Jeremy McNichols as a streaming spot start type of option. So what we do know is Brian Robinson left the game with an ankle injury, and then Austin Eckler left the game with a concussion. Remember back earlier in the year, week 4 versus the Cardinals, he played almost 40% of the snaps, had 2 touchdowns. Then in week 5 versus Cleveland, played 22% of the snaps, another touchdown. He has been a serviceable name for this team. He averaged over 7 yards per carry with just 3 carries this week. So again, if you need someone as a desperation play, Jeremy McNichols is probably going to be the starter for the Washington Commanders. At number 3, let's talk about Trey Benson. Let's be honest, at this point of the season, you are only thinking about upside or spot starts. That's what you're thinking about at this point. And if we're heading into the playoffs, you need to have these high upside handcuffs stashed. For example, Trey Benson. Every time Trey Benson has had opportunities for the Cardinals, he has looked very good. 4.5 yards per carry this week. But in week 10, he had 6.2 yards per carry, over 10 fantasy points. The week before that, he had a rushing touchdown, 4.6 yards per carry. The week before that, 10 yards per carry, 5 yards per carry, 5 yards per carry. He's been very, very good on a good offense. And again, if James Conner went down, this is a guy that you could start in the playoffs and trust your week with him type of scenario. So definitely go out and roster the handcuffs like your Trey Bensons. Also like your Blake Corums, right? Another name that should absolutely be rostered. Has been pretty efficient with the small opportunities that he's been given. And we know that if Kyren Williams was to go down for whatever reason, we know that Rams running backs are league winners, especially in McVay's system. So you absolutely have to have these guys stashed on your roster. At number 5, let's talk about Devin Singletary. So Tyrone Tracy currently has 4 fumbles on the year. This team just fired Brian Daboll. There will be an interim head coach, and there is a possibility that Devin Singletary retakes this job for New York. And if that's the case, again, you have a flexible name, specifically in deeper formats, and they have a pretty good schedule upcoming. They've got New Orleans in week 14, Dallas in week 13, and then Indianapolis in week 17. So I still think that Devin Singletary is worth the stash. Again, unfortunately, as good as Tyrone Tracy has been, you've got 1 fumble in week 4, 2 fumbles in week 10, and another fumble in week 12. 4 fumbles total, and it's starting to catch up with his opportunities. All right, the next name we will talk about here is Gus Edwards. Now, Gus has not played yet, all right? So you have to be aware of that. But if you're watching this video and Gus Edwards is out there, definitely a name that's worth rostering. We thought at one point Kamani Vidal could be the second running back on this team. But if J.K. Dobbins goes down, it's very clear that Gus Edwards would be the lion's share back in an offense that is very run-centric. All right, moving on to wide receivers. This is my list of my top 8 wide receivers that might be on the waiver wire for some of you guys. I doubt Jerry Jeudy is out there, but in case Jerry Jeudy is, he's been fantastic since Jameis Winston took over. If you guys remember, that was kind of like week 8 territory. He had 8 targets in week 8, almost 13 fantasy points. 11 targets in week 9, 14 fantasy points. In week 11 versus the Saints, 11 targets. Again, he has a touchdown, over 26 fantasy points. He was even good in the snow game versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. 6 catches, 85 yards rather, sorry. He is just a reliable, flexible name right now. And don't blink now, but he is a wide receiver 21 on the season. That might surprise you. If he's out there, he's got to be rostered. And also, Elijah Moore is becoming a more reliable name. Again, you look at that same time span, the Jameis Winston experience, 12 targets, 9 targets, 8 targets, 5 targets in a snow game. He's been a flexible name. And keep in mind that we just saw Cedric Tillman leave last game, the Thursday Night Football game, with a concussion. So there's a chance there's no Cedric Tillman this week when they face the Denver Broncos. That would mean Elijah Moore could be a flexible name, even in a tough matchup. All right, the third option that you could pick up is Marquez Valdez-Scantling, or MVS. He has back-to-back weeks, kind of filling that Rashid Shaheed role, right? Playing about 50, 60% of the snaps, but getting those deep touchdowns, 2 touchdowns in week 11 versus the Falcons. And then the next week, another touchdown, a long bomb, where he actually took it. He had a lot of yak in that game. But the reality is, at some point, if Chris Olave comes back, then MVS is going to fill that Shaheed role already. We know Derek Carr loves to throw the ball deep. And regardless of if Chris Olave is back or not, MVS is a really fun, high upside, desperation flex to add if you need that type of name. All right, how about Devon Vele? Devon Vele, don't sleep on this boy now, okay? 9 targets, which is a career high. He had 8 targets in week 1, then suffered that injury, has slowly been working back into the rotation, now has 3 weeks in a row over 10 PPR points. And if we come over here and look at the Broncos this week, you can see Devon Vele was second in snaps, second in routes run, and he was second in targets with 9. So he is clearly the wide receiver 2 for this team. We thought at one point, hey, maybe Troy Franklin was going to take that role, but they clearly love Devon Vele, the 26-year-old rookie, and he is producing. And we know that there's a pretty good schedule upcoming for these Broncos, right? Indianapolis in week 15, Cincinnati in week 17, Cleveland next week. So I definitely think he's worth a pickup in deeper formats. Let's talk about Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, eeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini. I mean, what can I say about the guy? The guy has 6 touchdowns in the last 7 weeks. All the guy does is score a touchdown every single game. This is basically MVS, but instead of Derek Carr, you've got Will Levis. But we have an 11-point game versus Detroit, a 16 game versus the Patriots, 19.7 versus the Vikings. He did it again this week versus the Houston Texans. Another touchdown. I mean, they just love to find this guy deep. And since the DeAndre Hopkins trade, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine has been a starting wide receiver for this team. He played 60 snaps, which was more than Calvin Ridley, more than any other wide receiver in Tennessee. He ran the most routes, and he was tied for second in targets with 5. Again, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is a legit flexible option in deeper formats, as crazy as that sounds. Moving on to the Baba Yaga, Dontavion Wicks himself. Look, this is only for deep formats, but here's the deal. Romeo Doubs did go down with a concussion, and we have seen Dontavion Wicks be a good, flexible name without Romeo Doubs in the past. So if you want to pick up him, you can. The other option you can think about is David Moore, who did have 10 targets versus the Kansas City Chiefs. This wide receiver room in Carolina is kind of confusing. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, Adam Thielen is kind of slowly working his way back in. 4 targets, 3 catches for 57 yards, almost 10 PPR points. I don't really believe that this is going to be reliable for David Moore, this 681-1 type of stat line. But there's just so many names that you have to think about here. For example, we have David Moore, obviously. We have Xavier Legette. We have Adam Thielen. Jalen Coker didn't play in this game. So there's just so many mouths to feed in an offense that really isn't a superstar offense that you would expect multiple players to be fantasy relevant in. But the good news is David Moore, led the team in snaps, was second in routes run, was first in targets by a long shot, had a huge amount of targets. I mean, 10 out of 31 targets is ridiculous. Such a high target share. I also think Adam Thielen is worth targeting because, again, 38 snaps in his first day back, 27 routes run out of the slot. I think he could get a larger role as the season progresses, but it's good to see him at least be involved right away. All right, if you need a quarterback, here's some names that you can consider. Number 1 is Tua Tagovailoa. He's been on a nice little streak here in the last couple weeks. Versus the Raiders, no interceptions, almost 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. He follows it up the following week versus the Patriots, 300 plus yards, 4 passing touchdowns. He's been on an absolute tear. He's got pretty decent matchups upcoming, games where they're going to have to throw the ball, like in the playoffs, Houston, San Francisco, Cleveland. I still think he's a streamable name each and every week. On the opposite side, Anthony Richardson. If you want to pick him up, I don't blame you. He should have had a better day in fantasy. He actually had a tight end drop an open touchdown. So a lot of today wasn't really on him, and I've been quite harsh on him on this channel. But you look at it, New England next week. If you need a win, I feel like he is a great start versus New England. Remember, we just talked about Tua throwing 4 touchdowns over 300 yards versus this defense. And then in the playoffs, you've got Tennessee and the New York Giants in week 17. I wouldn't start him versus Denver, but if you want to start him versus the Giants, I honestly don't hate that in week 17. So again, in desperate situations, you can pick up these names. Now, I want to talk about the following quarterbacks for super flex leagues: Aiden O'Connell, Tyrod Taylor, and then Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito. If you're in a super flex league, you know how difficult it is to get a reliable quarterback that you can start. Well, these are names that you can stash and you can see what they become. All right, for Aiden O'Connell, for example, Aiden O'Connell is going to be the starter for this team because Gardner Minshew is going to be out for the season. He will not play in this game anymore. Well, he won't play again this year, rather. And remember, last year in 2023, we saw Aiden O'Connell down the stretch as a rookie have a 25-point game, 4 touchdowns versus the Chargers, a 20-point game, 2 touchdowns versus the Colts, and then in week 18 versus Denver, a good defense, another 2 touchdowns, no turnovers from week 15 onwards. So, in an offense that has Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers, there are worse options to put in your super flex spot. Let's talk about Tyrod Taylor real quick. Tyrod Taylor, there's a chance based off reports that Aaron Rodgers could be shut down for the year. And if he is, Tyrod Taylor, who has rushing upside, who has Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall on his team, could be a real sneaky league winner. I know that's crazy to say, but specifically in super flex leagues, guys who are struggling, desperately need a quarterback too, he could be sneaky. And then at the third option, let's talk Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito. I think one of these guys are worth rostering, whoever's available. You've got Baltimore week 15, one of the best matchups for your quarterback. Then Atlanta, another great matchup. Then Indianapolis, another great matchup in championship weeks. All right, let's move on to the tight end position. Number 1 pickup, if he's out there, is Taysom Hill. We all know what he's capable of. 42 points in week 11 versus Cleveland. If you remember, 8 carries, 50 yards, multiple touchdowns on the ground. This guy, with the amount of injuries they've had in New Orleans, he's just been that army knife that they can plug and play pretty much anywhere, and you can play him as well with how tough the tight end position is. Let's talk about Jonnu Smith. Man, what a run Jonnu Smith has been on. From week 5 onwards, we have games of 8, 7, 6, 6, 8, and 11 targets. This week, he had 11 targets, caught 9 of them for 87 yards and a touchdown, 23 fantasy points, back-to-back weeks over 23 PPR points. And when you look at the target distribution in Miami this week, he led the way with 11. All right, he almost doubled Tyreek Hill's targets. Why is this happening? I don't know. I can't wrap my head around it, but it is happening. So, a name that you can definitely, we know how difficult it is to start tight ends. You can definitely start Jonnu Smith with the current form that he's on. How about Will Disley, who you might be able to pick up while you're watching this video before he plays on Monday Night Football? His first read target rate has been super high. He and Justin Herbert are on the same page. They've got a lot of synergy going on right now. Outside of that, you've also got names like Zach Ertz, who has had a touchdown in back-to-back weeks, over 15 PPR points in back-to-back weeks. Jaden Daniels is scared to throw it down the field lately. So Zach Ertz is becoming his go-to option at the moment, which is strange to say. We've also got names like Noah Gray, who has 2 touchdowns in back-to-back weeks, over 18 PPR points in back-to-back weeks. I don't understand it. I really don't believe that this is going to continue. So you can only do this in desperate situations, but I mean, it is happening. We have to talk about it. And when we think about a name like Noah Gray, we have to ask ourselves, well, is he involved or is this just like randomness? Well, he's definitely involved. He played 44 out of 74 snaps, so over 50%, well over 50%. He had 26 routes compared to 38 for Travis Kelce, and he had half the targets of Kelce, but still was very involved. So yeah, in deeper formats, you can pick him up in your 16-team type of formats. But if you're out there in an 8 or 10-team league, I don't think he's worth really picking up at this point. But all right, we did something a little bit different this week. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Did you enjoy this format, or do you enjoy the individual type of breakdowns that we used to do? Appreciate you guys for watching the video. If you have a specific question for me in fantasy this week, check out the pinned comment. You can ask me a question at any time through our website. And if you don't have an account on our website just yet, get one for free when signing up with the promo code LAND, L-A-N-D. When you sign up with our code, you'll get the My Team Analyzer, the ranking, expert rankings, the trade calculator tools, all for free by using our code. I appreciate you. Let's get better this week. All up. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.